This podcast is produced by the Fireside Chat Club of Canada.
Hello, and welcome to Canada as I see it. Hello, and welcome to this week's podcast. I want to thank Aidan, who introduced the show this week. You may recognize Aidan's voice. I used his voice back in January, I believe. And as it stands, I'm just looking at the list here, I've got about a half a year's worth of voices, but I could really use some more. If you'd like to contribute to the show, please send me your voice saying, "This podcast is produced by the Fireside Chat Club of Canada." And you can email it to me at asiseeit@warpole.ca. Thanks so much, everyone. Please do send your voices in. This week, I don't really have a specific date that I'm speaking of, but I'm going to talk about two essays that I wrote a few years ago. Well, to be precise, almost precisely 4 years ago. It was from August 16th and August 17th of 2020 that I wrote these. There's a bit of similarity between the two. These are what I would call the first past the line Canadian points. Now, the first essay was called "The First Commercial Oil Well." But when you're looking at claims of being the largest or best or first these days, it usually comes down to who has the loudest voice, regardless of what the actual truth is. Now, if you type in the phrase "the first commercial oil well" into Google, Yahoo, Bing, Ask, or even Excite, which I was surprised it still exists, and the first answer you get on each one is Oil Creek near Titusville, Pennsylvania, and that was in 1859. Now that's what I'm getting at is, of course, the Americans. They came up with it. Oil wells, yeah. But if you search for the first commercial oil well in Canada, you get Oil Springs in Petrolia, which is near Sarnia, Ontario, in 1858, a year prior to the U.S. discovery. Yeah, that's just such a typical Canadian trait. Yeah, we know. The facts speak for themselves. No need to push it. Now, the second one is a little similar, and again, I'm going to tell you the subject, and you're going to say, of course, the telephone. Now, several people have made claims that they were the person to invent the telephone. Among them were Alexander Graham Bell, Elisha Gray, Antonio Meucci. In this case, Canada does seem to have a claim for being the first, and it's really because of a couple of factors. The first, Bell's lawyer. You knew the lawyer would have to get in on this, right? Bell's lawyer submitted the papers for the invention of the telephone at the U.S. Patent Office several hours before Gray's lawyer did on February 14th, 1876. Meucci had submitted what is known as a patent caveat to the Patent Office in 1871. That's 5 years before that. And, well, that's actually what's called a placeholder in the legal realm. It explains what he was going to do, but it didn't have any details. The key omission in his paper was the lack of mention of electromagnetic transmission of voices. And the caveat, unfortunately, was allowed to lapse, and essentially nothing came of it. Now, there was a lot of work that went into this, and the final result, it may surprise you. It sounds like something you would click online, right? But Bell had actually had the experience of transmitting sounds by wire 8 months prior to his submitting the patent application. And, of course, like a lot of inventions, this was purely by accident. His assistant, Thomas Watson, had left some wiring packed up against the electromagnet, the microphone, and he moved the wires a little to put them somewhere else, and Bell was able to hear the wires being plucked in another room. So, as I say, essentially an accident. It makes me think of Doc Brown in Back to the Future, hitting his head on the sink in the bathroom and coming up with the idea for the flux capacitor. So there are 2 stories of how being first in line really made a difference. There was 18 years between the first Canadian oil well and the telephone, but the one thing you will notice is that the lawyers got in on the telephone and submitted that patent. Now, just so we're clear on everything as far as the telephone and Bell goes, Bell was born in Scotland, and his family emigrated to Canada, and he subsequently married an American, which made him a naturalized American citizen. But Bell did actually invent the telephone at his parents' house in Brantford, Ontario. So that's where the Canadian connection comes in there. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. I will talk to you again next week. And that's a part of Canada as I see it. It is written and produced by me, James Warple, and brought to life by the Fireside Chat Club of Canada. Our theme song is Night Owls by Braden Deal. If you have any questions or comments, please email me at asiseeit@warple.ca. Join us every Sunday for another episode of Canada as I See It.